Let's start at the end because that's where all the interesting things live. The silence broke, but not with a roar, with a whisper. A delayed signature that arrived like a train pulling into the station 3 hours late, no apology, no explanation that actually explains anything. Claudio Domenicali, the man who steers Ducati, the most dominant machine MotoGP has ever produced, finally opened his mouth and said the words, pretty much finalized. That's how he described Marc Marquez's contract for 2027. Not signed, not sealed, not even fully confirmed, just pretty much. Two of the softest, flimsiest, most wonderfully useless words in the entire motorsport dictionary. And they came from the CEO of a factory that has spent years turning Grand Prix racing into a red parade. So why those words, why now, and why the long, aching silence before them? Because the delay wasn't paperwork, it wasn't a calendar glitch or a lawyer's vacation. The delay was the story, the pause between January when everyone expected Marquez to put pen to paper, and now that pause is where the real race was run. Think about it. This is a man who just won his 8th world title, a man who in 2025 tore through the field with 11 wins from 16 races. A man who proved to every paddock insider, every armchair analyst, every doubter still clinging to the ghost of Jerez 2020, the ant of Cervera is not only still standing, he's still biting. So why does a reigning world champion make Ducati wait? Because champions don't chase, they don't beg, they don't leap at the first offer like a rookie praying for a seat, they let the world come to them. Marc Marquez sat in silence, watched the market breathe, watched the chess pieces shuffle, and only then, only when the temperature was exactly right, did he move. That wasn't hesitation, that was a blade being sharpened. Let's rewind the tape to September 2025. San Marino, that's where Marquez last stood on top of the podium. A few weeks later, he sealed the championship in Japan with a second place. That's the man Ducati is dealing with, a 9-time world champion, the author of one of the most ferocious comebacks in sporting history. And you're telling me Ducati needed until May to announce his renewal? That's not negotiation, that's a symptom, a signal. And if you know how to read signals, this one is genuinely terrifying. Here's the thing nobody is saying out loud. If your bike is a weapon, if it's the most feared machine on the grid, you don't think twice about keeping the man who turned it into a nuclear warhead. You sign him immediately, you lock him down before breakfast. You don't let silence grow like mold in the corners of a press release, but the silence grew. And then Domenicali steps up with his pretty much finalized, while Marquez shows up to race weekends with a broken shoulder, crashes out of Grand Prix after winning sprints, and watches a 44-point gap to Marco Bezzecchi widen in real time, right in front of the whole world. 4 rounds into 2026, and the reigning world champion sits 5th in the standings. 5th, 44 points behind Bezzecchi, a rider who used to be his teammate and is now his tormentor. And Jorge Lorenzo, who knows exactly what it takes to win on a Ducati because he did it, isn't sugarcoating anything. Lorenzo's diagnosis is brutal and simple. Marquez can't brake, not properly, not the way you need to on a Desmos Decide. That shoulder injury, the latest one, the one that keeps stacking on top of the old ones, has robbed him of the one thing a Ducati rider cannot live without: the ability to throw the anchor out at 200 miles an hour and ask the front tire to believe in miracles. Let's decode that properly because Ducati has a problem here and nobody wants to name it. The incident in Indonesia, lap 1, contact with Bezzecchi, the coracoid process, ligaments, the right shoulder, the same right side that nearly ended his career in 2020, the same arm that turned into a medical file longer than a novel. MotoGP official doctor didn't mince words, this was serious. That shoulder had already been ravaged by the Jerez crash, the one that almost finished him. Then came Texas, COTA 2026, high-speed, violent, same right side again. At some point you stop calling it bad luck and start calling it a pattern, a body being dismantled round by round, season by season, by a sport that doesn't forgive weakness. But here's the part that cuts deepest. He still went out, he still lined up. In Jerez, speaking to the media, Marquez said he was back to full fitness after the break. But then he admitted the early laps are a battle, losing body temperature on the grid, having to warm up a second time when the race starts. He's managing pain mid-race, he's calculating warmth and tendon usage while fighting for positions, and Ducati is standing there saying pretty much finalized. That's not a contract extension, that's an empire being held together by a fractured shoulder and stubbornness. And then there's the 2026 Ducati itself. Where is it? Where is the invincible machine we were promised? Bezzecchi and Jorge Martin have both become forces at the front, Bezzecchi now at Aprilia no less, and they're making the factory red look ordinary. The man who broke Marquez's shoulder in Indonesia is now leading the championship. Think about the poetry of that. The man who broke the champion is now the king of the championship. And Ducati, with all its engineers, all its budget, all its dominance from previous years, cannot stop it, cannot even answer it. Marc can't brake hard, The 2026 bike doesn't feel like the 2025 weapon, and the title is bleeding away every Sunday. So here's the question that deserves to sit in the room, uncomfortable and uninvited. Can Ducati still claim to have the best bike on the grid? Not one of those victories this year belongs to the man who destroyed everybody last season. Something has shifted, the stranglehold is loosening, and the fact that it takes a broken, half-fit Marc Marquez to expose that's not the conversation Ducati wants to have, but it's the conversation we're going to have anyway. Now let's leave the lights on for a different story. Just crack the door open, because we're coming back to this. Santi Hernandez, Marc's former crew chief, the man who built championships with him from scratch, who knows Marquez's riding style, his psychology, his pain thresholds, his silences better than almost anyone alive. Hernandez sat down and said calmly and cleanly, "I don't think so. He's at Ducati, he's happy, he's found his smile again." That was his answer to possible Honda reunion. Except, is it really that simple? Because the same man also said Marquez won't race until he's 40. He's 33 now. That gives us maybe 3, maybe 4 more years at the absolute ceiling. The clock is running, the body is sending withdrawal notices. And Honda is not dead. Honda is rebuilding. Honda is watching everything. And Marc Marquez, for all his Ducati happiness, for all his renewed smile and his renewed title that was home, 6 world titles, a decade, a dynasty built in those Japanese colors. Does a man of that legacy simply ride off into the sunset on Italian red as happy as a tourist in Bologna? Or does a part of him, the part that remembers the throne, the part that wants to close the circle, the part that still hears the roar of the Honda at full chat, does that part keep one eye on what HRC is quietly putting on the table? Hernandez himself said their friendship survives everything. It will be there when Marc retires, and when he retires. That's not the language of someone who has bolted the door shut. That's the language of someone who knows the final chapter isn't written yet. Right now, with Honda's trajectory unclear, with their 2026 and 2027 machinery still a mystery in the paddock, we don't have answers. We have gray area, we have watching briefs. We have a story that refuses to end cleanly. But back to the contract, back to the blood, back to the question that strips everything down to the bone. Why are we here? Why is the reigning world champion taking multiple months to be officially confirmed at the factory he just won a title with? Because Ducati himself admitted it. The delay in announcing rider signings is tied to ongoing negotiations between manufacturers and MotoGP commercial rights holder. The commercial structure is bigger than the champion. The machine, not the motorcycle, the machinery of money and television rights and legal fine print, is bigger than Marc Marquez. 8 world titles, 73 MotoGP wins, one of the greatest to ever throw a leg over a motorcycle, and he's sitting in a waiting room built by lawyers and broadcast deals. He knew it, that's why he didn't sign in January, that's why he withheld, that's why he gave Ducati time instead of giving them a free pass. Because a champion who's been broken, rebuilt, broken again and rebuilt again, that man does not give anything away. Not a signature, not a smile. Not a single millimeter of his pride. He forces the room to prove its worth first. So here we are, the shoulder bleeds, the points gap grows, the signature waits in a drawer somewhere in Bologna, and Marc Marquez rides half-hurt, fully furious, not yet done, into a season that feels like it's testing whether the legend still has enough left to bend reality one more time. Pretty much finalized. Yeah, we'll see about that.